What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, and break down what's happening with the FOMC meeting that just came out, and what's affecting Tesla, not to mention big news involving Tesla and the technicals. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on invested cash. This offer ends in just 12 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about Tesla. So looking at Tesla, I just want to say that just like the broader markets, we're seeing some signals that suggest that there could be a trend shift, and we could see a little bit of a decline that's coming. So the reason for that is because of the fact that the market priced in a lot of what was said during FOMC, and Jerome Powell didn't really say anything to really pump the markets for a more sustainable period of time. And the market set some very, very tough resistance that's still slowing it down based off technicals, seasonality, and all these different factors. So I will talk more about the charts in just a couple of minutes, but I first want to talk about FOMC and some news. So today we had the FOMC meeting. The first thing that happened at 2 p.m. was we got the Fed decision. The Fed gave us a cut of 50 basis points. This was a little bit better than what many people were thinking, but the majority of Fed officials did end up voting for that. So the market got a very, very nice pump in the very beginning. We saw Tesla go from 227 for the day, going all the way up to 235, pumping 8 points, only to dump back down as time went on. We saw SPY go from being in like the lower 560s all the way up to about 568, only to dump back down as well as Jerome Powell's speech continued. So what else did the Fed tell us? So we first got this nice cuts. The market liked it initially, but then what happened was things shifted. We also got the economic projections report, and this is very important. So the Fed is telling us that they're going to be cutting more than what we initially expected. So if you look at like the June projections, things are lower now than they were before. However, despite doing that, during Jerome Powell's speech at 2:30, which led the markets eventually dipping, Jerome Powell said some very important things. So let me tell you guys something very important. Now, the Fed gave us that 50 basis point cut. Jerome Powell is saying the economy is fine, things are okay, and some people are buying it, other people are not. And I personally do not buy it either. The same Fed that told us that the economy was okay, inflation was transitory, now they're telling us that the economy is fine, and I don't buy it. I think that what's happening is the 50 basis point cuts could signify many different things. It could be that the Fed is behind, maybe not, or it could be that the Fed is trying to scramble because the economy is contracting. Now, because data is very biased and because of the data that's being released, I'm forced to kind of accept the data as a trader because that's what the market's running based off of. But I just want to say that Jerome Powell kind of implied that the data that we are seeing is not as accurate or as real as one may think. I think that despite the fact that they're showing signs that inflation is declining, I don't truly think that inflation is just out of the water. And I don't think the Fed has officially defeated everything just like that. And I also want to say that I don't think the economy is fine, like the way Jerome Powell is painting it out to be. He's just trying to keep everyone calm before the election. The election is a very, very big factor. So, what I think is happening is there's a lot of contractions in our GDP. There's a lot of weakness in a lot of economic data. When you look at like manufacturing numbers, for example, and then on top of that, unemployment is going up. Americans are losing jobs. Americans are struggling. It's the honest truth. And I don't think that we're in a place where the economy's fine, like he said. I think that we're in a recession or we're about to enter a recession. I think there's hardships coming, and I think people have to be very careful. So I think the Fed knows this. The Fed is very conscious of all of this, but they're trying to just keep everyone calm. They're not trying to crash the markets, do anything like that. I think that's why Jerome Powell is being very careful with his words, because if he was super hawkish and told the truth that, hey, a recession is on the table, it's a possibility, this market could have crashed way harder and super, super fast. And that didn't happen because he was very careful with his words. Okay. So as time goes on, we're expecting the Fed to give us more cuts for the year, even more cuts than what we were projecting back in June. However, Jerome Powell did not confirm whether or not it's going to be a big cut, a small cut in November. He said they have to do this meeting by meeting. So, in my view, I think that from the way things are looking, the market thinks that there's a 67% chance we get a 25 basis point cut and a 32% chance we get a 50 basis point cut in November. This is during the election times. That's going to be another big factor. I personally don't know what it's going to be, but I just want to say that we're still waiting on a lot of data for the next couple of weeks, such as the next CPI and a bunch of different things like that before this ends up happening. So we'll be waiting to see how that goes. So with that being said, the market priced in the Fed giving us the cut that they gave. And with that being said, it's kind of like a buy the rumor, sell the news event. That's why the market got a more negative reaction. For more data, there's one more thing I want to talk about before I talk about Tesla news and the charts. For tomorrow, what's happening is an hour before the market opens, we have some data. We have some initial jobless claims and continuing jobless claims data sets coming out. So we'll see how the jobs numbers look tomorrow morning before the market opens by 1 hour. Then we also have the Philly Fed employment, new orders, and prices data also coming out. So look for some volatility 1 hour before the market opens. We'll see how the employment numbers come out. They're going to be very important. And then on top of all of that, we have the 4 and 8 week bill auctions at 11:30, very minor data, and everything else is very minor for tomorrow. So that's what I'm seeing for the markets, at least in terms of economic data for tomorrow. And don't forget, the market is still going to be reacting to FOMC. Jerome Powell was giving his speech until like almost the end of the day, so the market only had some time to react. But we're going to see even more reactions tomorrow, so be prepared for that tomorrow morning. All right, a couple more things. I'll talk about the charts. Tesla has some very, very big news that GM is finally accessing this Tesla superchargers. That's great news. This is important because they're going to be looking at different changes for the people out there who drive Chevys, Cadillacs, and GMCs. They can now plug in their cars at the Tesla charger stations. And on top of that, I think that's Tesla will make a lot more revenue thanks to this. It's going to give them a lot more attention. And on top of this, they have some new uh, updates to their apps, which allow people to actually locate these charging ports. And then they have new chargers coming out. So very, very great news for Tesla. This is going to give them a lot more attention, a lot more revenue. I think it's very, very great news. So that's awesome. On top of this, Tesla had about 78 million, falling a little bit above what we saw like yesterday, but it's still below average. And then when you look at short volume, it's still down, but this might start going up a little bit. Finally, Cantor Fitzgerald is neutral on Tesla, whereas others out there are giving Tesla buy ratings. So very, very mixed views of Tesla. The price pairs ratio is a little bit low as Tesla's not as strong and not as weak as before. And in terms of seasonality, we do have a tendency being green only about 48% of the time on Thursdays. It tends to be one of the weaker days for Tesla. We tend to see more volatility around the first hour of the day, followed by 1 p.m. So look for more volatility at those times tomorrow. And besides that, just know that September tends to be a weak month for Tesla. October tends to be a very weak month. So we'll see how it goes with the Robotaxi event. So that being said, that's it for my data. Let's focus on the charts. What do I see for Tesla and the markets? Looking at Tesla to start us off. So I just want to say that Tesla has some very stubborn resistance. The resistance is so stubborn, it's stopping Tesla when it really wants to run. And that's a big sign of weakness. So Tesla keeps hitting 235. We hit this, rejected, hit it, rejected, hit it again, rejected, rejected. 235 is very tough for Tesla, even like back here. And that once again acted as resistance and Tesla rejected again. So when you look at Tesla, the direction was upwards. If you guys look at the uptrend Tesla has been in, but then what happened was Tesla is now starting to show signs that it's stagnating. It's slowing down at this 235 resistance. So if we do end up losing our support, I want to make this very, very clear. We're going to be looking at this 225 area for Tesla. If that does not hold, I do see Tesla dipping a little bit more because the daily is showing a lot of weakness. I want to make that very clear. So to be bullish on Tesla, you want to hold above 230 and eventually break 235. If 235 breaks, we could be pushing to fill this gap all the way up towards the 245 area. If Tesla does the opposite and we end up losing our support at 225, we're looking for a target of 221.5 as we have a gap down here. There's also another gap below on the 4 hours. So you want to be very careful. The daily looks a little bit weaker, so it's signifying some more downside, a stronger possibility, especially because FOMC was kind of like a buy the rumor, sell the news event, meaning that we kind of priced in a lot of what was going to end up coming out. And then once the event happened, we ended up seeing a dip. And I think there's a good chance that that could be the new norm because Jerome Powell was also ambiguous. He did not confirm more cuts. He said that the Fed is, although they're planning more cuts for the end of the year, it's not confirmed what they're going to be doing for November until they see the data. So because he said that, I don't think that it's enough to really cause the market to rally more or like super, super hard. I think the SPY is at some tough resistance, so is the QQQ. I think the market may collectively sell off a bit as the most likely case. So once again, if you break 230, Tesla could turn back up. If we lose 225, we're looking for a dip to 221. I think what's going to happen is we get that dip. I think that tomorrow Tesla's going to gap up, try to push a little bit higher to close to 230. Then we could be looking for a move back down to 225 or below. We look kind of weak on the daily looking at our trend shift. And I think that the resistance at 235 is very tough. So Tesla may get a temporary little dip to 225, if not below, as the most likely possibility. Watch your levels just to be safe. On SPY, I want to call out that there's a triple bearish divergence on the daily time frame. On the 4-hour time frame, we're also looking kind of weak with this liquidity grab that formed. So we love to grab liquidity before we start to turn. And you can see we're kind of turning in terms of our trend. We do like to do this on SPY. So I think what's going to happen is this. I think tomorrow we're going to gap up most likely, and we're going to look for another attempt to rally. We're going to try to push in the morning. Then there could be a dip coming for SPY. So for Tesla, I just want to clarify this. Tesla may try to push for the 230s in the morning, then eventually it might start dipping back down. If we lose the support in the low of the day, we're looking for 225 as a target. So a little pump and dump like move is likely coming to Tesla. And I think SPY is going to likely do the same thing. For SPY, if we lose, okay, this trend line, we're holding this yellow trend line right over here. If we lose the 560 area, we're looking for that gap fill all the way down towards 559, then eventually a move back down to 557 at the 50 EMA. If we end up holding above 563, we're looking for 564.6 up here, very close to 565, then eventually 566. I presume that SPY is looking kind of weak, and the daily is showing a little bit of weakness right over here as we got this rejection. So tomorrow, we'll look for a little bit of a bounce, a little gap up, a little push higher, then a rejection. I think SPY will eventually come down to fill this gap to at least 559 very, very soon. So a gap up, a little bit of a push, then a rejection is the most likely possibility. For ES, we pushed up to the resistance at the 5,700 area. We could go a little bit higher. I think ES may try to push a little higher, but then be careful because we could reject it, come back down to fill this gap. I think there's a chance that that's what it's going to be doing. Look for a little bit more upside towards 57.25, some consolidation up here, eventually rejection back down. If we end up losing 56.80, we're looking for that gap fill all the way down towards 56.40. Look for a little bit of a push and rejection and move all the way back down. Watch for that very carefully, guys. ES does have that potential to reject, so we'll give it the time it needs. For Nvda, I think Nvidia is looking kind of weak on the daily. We've got to reclaim 116 to turn back up. If we fail to do so, I see a risk of us coming down towards that 111, then 109 area. So I do see some downside potential in this. So be very, very careful. For Bitcoin, Bitcoin is once again, it has a nice kind of like accumulation structure right here. If we break past 62,000, we're looking for this imbalance to fill towards 63,000. If we end up losing 58,750, we could be dipping back down lower, all the way down here. So I think that Bitcoin is actually on a bit of a downtrend. And I know there was that pattern, but the issue with Bitcoin is this. When you zoom out, we have this yellow trend line acting as resistance. So Bitcoin could try to pop a little bit, then reject, and we could be looking for a move back down to the 59,000. But I think this is going to try to push a little bit above the trend line just temporarily, then consolidate, and eventually make its move back down. That's what I find to be the most likely possibility. Now, with that being said, with the market kind of dictating the way flow is coming in, Tesla could be making its way down to the trend line as well that we happen to have. A pop and drop is also a strong possibility when you zoom out and you look at this potential rejection that's forming. For NQ, check this out, guys. NQ also has that gap to fill below. So when you zoom in like this, we could be testing 19,700, but if that rejects, we could be looking for a move towards 19,600. If that fails us, we have that gap to fill all the way down towards 19,500. I think what's going to happen is we push a little bit tomorrow morning, consolidate up here in the 19,700 to 19,800 area. Then we reject and come back down to fill that gap. I think that the QQQ is going to be dictated that way, and we were going to be coming back down to fill these, not fill these gaps, but also come down to test these EMAs. So I think we gap up tomorrow. We push towards 475 on QQQ. We could even try to go a little higher and consolidate for some time, but eventually I see that the move will fail and we'll be coming back down to about 468. So a pump and dump tomorrow seems like a strong possibility. Look for a test of 475. We'll see if that breaks. If it does break that, we're looking for 477 or so. I think 475 might be sufficient, so we might be trying to retest this liquidity zone right here before we see that move down. We're going to gap up tomorrow and start dipping. And if we lose the low at 470, around that 470 area tomorrow, we're looking for 467 as a potential target. So I just want to call that out. For Aapl, we're testing resistance right here. We have this trend line. So we have this yellow line acting as our resistance. We tested this, rejected, tested this, rejected. So if we reclaim 224, we turn back up. If we don't do so, we're looking for a dip back down towards 219. I favor it's going to try to hit this and start dipping lower, all the way down to 219 or below. We have this gap to fill at 216, so I favor it's going to eventually come down. So look for a little bit of a gap up, a little push, then move back down towards the 218 level, and then that gap fill below. For Palantir, we're kind of stuck in the middle. We have 37 as resistance and then 36 as support. If that fails us, we're going back down towards 35 or lower. Look for a gap up and a retest of 37. We could even try to shuffle up here close to 37, but I think that this may just continue to trade sideways for the time being. I don't see signs that this is truly rejecting. It's still holding up a lot better than other stocks out there. So look for a little bit of a push and consolidation before anything else. For Supermicro, I just want to say that this is looking a little bit weaker to me because of the fact that we have this rejection that's forming. So I think that there's a chance that this could pump and then reject. We're looking at this resistance at this 460 area, and our target would be back down towards this imbalance. So I think what's going to happen is we continue this downtrend. We kind of pop gap up a little bit tomorrow morning, retest the 440 zone, and start dipping all the way down towards 416. So look for some downside. For Rivian, we're also rejecting here, so we're kind of continuing to fall. We have this very important gap over here at this 12 area. So if we lose this support, we're going to be dipping all the way down towards 11.95 to 12, and I think there's a good chance we start dipping lower on Rivian. Look for a gap up and a little bit of a drop if 13 fails us. I think we're going to be coming down to fill that gap for the next couple of days. So far looks kind of weak here. We had this trend line acting as our support. Now it became our resistance as we popped to this. We're going to be retesting 8s tomorrow, most likely. If 8 fails us, we're going to be dumping towards 7.75. If 8 holds, we could try to bounce, but I favor it's going to kind of pop a little bit here and eventually lose 8 and start dipping. For the IWM, it's the same setup. I think that the Russell is looking a little bit weak here. We have a lot of gaps to fill. We have the gap right over here. There's this gap over here, and over here. I think that we could be looking for 220s resistance and a little bit of rejection. If we end up losing the 219s, we're looking for that gap to fill down towards 217, eventually lower levels. So I think we gap up tomorrow on the IWM, maybe push a little higher, but then we eventually come down to fill that gap. This could be forming a rejection, but watch 219 for confirmation. If 219 breaks, we're looking for that dip. We have 221 as resistance, so look for a little bit of a test on the 222 to 221 area before we end up rejecting, in my personal opinion. For AMD, we look kind of weak on the daily. We have that gap to fill over here, and we have like a bearish structure. Look at 147 as support. If that fails us, we're dipping all the way down towards 145. We also have resistance around 150. I presume we're going to kind of gap up and then start rejecting, start dipping back down towards 147. For ARM is kind of rejecting right over here. I think there's a good chance we kind of gap up towards that 140 area and start dipping back down towards 134. So I think we might gap up and start dipping. I find that to be the most likely case, especially as we have these gaps to fill. And if 133 fails, we could be dipping lower as well. So look for a gap up and a bit of a dip. That's the most likely case in my opinion. For Coinbase, where it's just range bound right here, we have 167 as resistance, then we have this support to watch for at 161, not to mention 156. So we're just range bound. I think coin could push a little bit higher towards 165, maybe above that, to start dipping back down. So watch and see what the move ends up being. For a few more, we have Amazon. If we break 188, we're looking for 190. And if we lose 186, we're looking for 184. We could push a little bit higher and start dipping back down to 184. That's the most likely case in my opinion. Look for a gap up. If we don't break 188 on that gap, or if we fail to hold above that, I think we dip back down to 184. For Meta, we're still holding up very well. It's actually showing some strength compared to the markets. We have 540 as a target. If that breaks, we're looking for 544 tomorrow. It did reject on 544 many times, but there's no sign of that happening yet. So I think it could push a little bit, but there's no sign of rejection unless we reject off 544. So far, it's holding up well, so we'll give it some time to see if 540 holds. So watch 544 as a key level, and we'll see how it ends up developing. For Microsoft, we look a little bit more bearish. We got this big rejection on the daily time frame. We're looking at this resistance to watch for at 434. If that breaks, we're looking for a bigger push for 436. And if we end up losing 430, we're looking for a dip back down towards 427. So I just want to call out that this yellow line, you guys see this yellow line? This is the breakout area. Generally, stocks like to test the breakout zone. So I think we might be dipping to 425 if 430 fails us. 427 and 425 are the two supports. So watch for a test of 430 tomorrow. If that fails us, we're going down to 427 or 425. Those are the most likely possibilities. Unless we hold 430, then it could shift. Google is barely holding its support at 160. That's also very close to our 20 EMA. If 160 fails us, we're coming down to fill the gap towards 150, the 159 area. We also have resistance at 162, so look for a little bit of a push and a rejection, and we could be dipping to 160. If that fails us, we come down to fill the gap down to 159. So I see some downside potential in Google if this turns. For DJT, we're kind of rejecting off our 20 EMA. I think there's a good chance we start dipping towards the 15 area. Looks kind of weak to me, so I think there's a good chance it dips. The VIX is about to make a big move. We'll have to see if we close above 18.05 or not, if we keep closing above that. Tomorrow, we're looking for a push to the 20s. We'll see if 18.05 holds or not, so watch for that. That could be bearish for the markets. The 10 year is making a big move. We'll see how this reacts depending tomorrow. It does have a slight bullish divergence. So if this bounces, that could be a sign that it's going to be looking for a 3.75, which could be bearish. We'll see if the dollar reclaims 101 or not. If it does reclaim this, we could be looking for 101.44, 20 EMA. We'll see about that. We're also going to give that some time. So as far as technicals go, the market has some stocks that are showing strength like Meta, but a lot of stocks like Tesla are kind of weak right now. I think there's a chance we start to see a little bit of a dip tomorrow. So that's what my view is. A little bit of a gap up tomorrow. We could gap up tomorrow, start pushing a little bit. But if Tesla doesn't hold this 230 area, we could be dipping back down to 227 and eventually down to 225. And I think there's a risk of Tesla dipping lower, kind of popping and dropping because we're really struggling to break past 235. Now, unless we get some kind of catalyst tomorrow, that's the most likely case. So that's what I'm seeing from a technical standpoint. I want to thank you all so much for listening. Please have a great day. Enjoy your evening. And I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow for another update. Get ready for the data that's coming out before the market opens. Until then, have a great night and peace out.